What is unconsciousness? Spiritually speaking, of course. You might often have heard people saying, so and so is so unconscious, or my guru is awakened. But what do these terms mean? How can you tell if someone is spiritually awake or not? The traditional ways were things like a guru who looked very spiritual, had a glowing head or whatever, light behind his head, and who looked very spiritual, who looked very peaceful, was peaceful. That's what people assumed, and in many ways still assume, that if you look spiritual, you must be spiritual. But it's easy to pretend to be spiritual. Anyone can go out and buy orange robes, and anyone can be outwardly peaceful, especially for an hour or two. It is easy to appear spiritual and calm if you just had a good meal and are feeling chilled out. And most people wouldn't know the difference between someone who is genuinely peaceful and someone who only looks peaceful because they just had sex with their mistress. So what do we mean by spiritual awakening or spiritual unconsciousness? This comes to the definition of the ego, the egoic mind, which I've previously defined as the part of the mind that identifies with the current body/mind. It's not a very great definition. The thing is, you have to identify with both the body and the mind for it to be egoic. Many people nowadays think they are above the body. Like this philosopher said, I think, therefore I am. The biggest mistake that people keep repeating. So just to say move beyond the body doesn't work, because I would say 90% of the people nowadays don't live in the body, they live in the mind. So 90% of the people can genuinely say that they have moved beyond the body while they are playing Angry Birds on their iPhone. They're living in their head and have zero awareness of the body. Living in the body doesn't mean you spend hours in the gym or spend hours doing makeup. It means being aware of your physical body, how it moves, how the breath moves, how the energy flows through it. So I have defined ego as moving both beyond the body and the mind. That is how you go beyond the ego. Because the ego is the part of you that identifies with the current body-mind complex. The problem with this definition is it is hard to define what the body-mind is. Here I mean body/mind. At what point do you move beyond the body and into the mind? I recently heard a much better definition from Eckhart Tolle that made a lot of sense to me. He said, unconsciousness is identifying with the stream of thinking. And that is also a good definition of the ego. The ego is the part of the mind, a part of ourself that identifies with the continuous, non-stop stream of thoughts. All of us live in our heads. Even physical people who spend a lot of time on their body. Like I said, either in the gym or doing makeup to make their body pretty. Even they spend all their time in the head. Because the reason they're making the body beautiful is not so that they can have a healthy life, but it is so others can admire them. And this comes from the mind, the non-stop thinking that we all suffer from. Our mind is always moving non-stop. Try to sit down at some time and try to watch your thoughts. Try it for at least 15 or 20 minutes and you will realize how many thoughts you have. The mind is always moving non-stop. There's a stream of thinking that is always going on in our head. Like mad people, we are always talking to ourselves. And the problem is, we identify with this voice in our head, this non-stop stream of thoughts. This is what spiritual unconsciousness is. Because these thoughts are not us. The thoughts are in many cases random or based on our childhood experiences, the culture we grew up in, the religion and country we grew up in, the family we grew up with. Based on all these things, the mind continuously chatters to itself, firing one thought after another. And the one thing you can be sure is that the mind, the egoic mind, loves negativity. It loves depression. It loves being sad. It loves picking a fight. It loves situations that are tense because it gives you something to do. something to analyze, something to fight, someone to argue with. I have seen this in my own life, that when I have nothing bad going on in my life, the mind starts making up stories about how other people might attack me or might say something bad to me. Or the mind goes back in the past about something someone said to me 10 years ago and gets me worked up all about it. The mind loves to fight others, to fight itself, to fight the system, the government, whatever. Because that is the only way the mind can stay alive. I'm sure you must have noticed this too. You're just walking down the road or sitting peacefully when you remember something someone said to you 5 years ago and you get all angry. Neuroscientists tell us that anger is like a drug, especially self-righteous anger. It is like a drug. It makes us feel really good about ourselves. I am right, they're all wrong. They're all out to get me. I will fight for my rights. I will fight for justice. The egoic mind loves that. And if it cannot find problems in the outer life, it will just make some up. It will imagine the fights with other people. It will imagine that other people are out to get you. Your mind will imagine that everyone hates you or is plotting against you. That's the reason all these soap serials are so popular. Because in each and every soap serial, you have the same story. A lovely, innocent hero or heroine just wants to mind her own business, but the whole world just wants to push her down. The victim complex is what the mind loves. It loves being a victim of circumstances, of the world. And it loves trying to imagine how everyone is out to get you. How you are just this poor soul just trying to survive. Why won't they let you? The first thing to understand is that there is no they who are out to get you and who want to destroy you. It's all in your head. The world is not out to get you. Your friends and the government are not plotting against you. Everything is not your parents' fault. Children these days are not out to teach the grown-ups a lesson. There is no conspiracy. It's all in your head. And that's what unconsciousness is. Identifying with the mad thoughts in your head and pretending they're real. Like I said, the egoic mind needs fight or trouble to survive. It must pick a fight with someone or something. Anyone will do. If it cannot find any real problems, it will invent some or look in the past. The mind thinks everyone is out to get it. But like I've said, many of these thoughts are automatic. You do not think them. The mind is continuously stuck in an infinite loop, looking for something to analyze, something to break down, someone to pick a fight with. The unconsciousness is you thinking that you are the mind, this non-stop stream of thoughts that are not in your control. The mind is useful when properly controlled. The mind can write great books, create great works of art, solve difficult problems, invent new scientific theories, build great technological marvels. The mind can do all that, but only when it is a slave, when it is working under you and not has taken over your identity. Currently, you are just a slave to your thoughts, and I can prove this. Try to sit for 10 minutes without any thoughts. That's the reason people struggle with meditation, because they realize how out of control their mind is. It is like going to the gym for the first time and realizing how weak you are. You had an idea in your mind about how strong you are, how you could do anything. But when you go to the actual gym, you realize you cannot even pick up a half a kilogram dumbbell because your arms hurt. Meditation is like that. We all think we are so spiritual because we have read the Gita or read the Tao Te Ching or read other books by famous gurus. But when we actually try to sit and meditate, that's when we realize how spiritually flabby we are, how spiritually unfit we are, how we cannot even sit quietly for 2 minutes. And this is because we identify so strongly with our thoughts. Our mind is so out of control that we have zero control over the mind, and we cannot get it to shut up when we want it to. We cannot do that because we are not the masters of this mind. We are its slaves. We must do what our mind tells us, or else the mind throws a tantrum and will destroy our meditation. Is there a way out of this problem? This problem child, the mind? What is the opposite of being spiritually unconscious? What does being spiritually awake mean? To be spiritually awake is to not to be identified with a thinking mind, and more specifically with the stream of thoughts that are continuously blasting through our mind. I've often said that, and so have other people, that spiritual awakening is a very simple thing. It is not a mystical state. It is not some weird, dreamlike state. You do not get to meet gods or angels. Though you may meet gods or angels, that is not spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening is a very natural and simple state in which you are not identified with the non-stop stream of thoughts running through your head. It is called resting in your own being, resting in your own inner self. What that feels like, I will not tell you, because the mind likes to grasp stuff. It likes to pretend that it has become enlightened before it has. I will say this, like the Buddha said, spiritual awakening is the end of suffering. Suffering will not go away immediately, and in fact, it can take many years for the spiritual awakening to settle down and become part of your complete being. But once the process starts, it cannot be stopped. Only slowed down by your mind fighting it. So spiritual awakening is the opposite of spiritual unconsciousness. The majority of people are identified with their stream of thinking, so much so that they think that their thinking is themselves. They keep telling themselves a story and identify with that story. The story could be, oh, I'm such a hardworking person, but no one respects me. Oh, I'm like this because my parents didn't love me. Oh, I've always been a weak body. I cannot help but getting sick because I'm so weak. Whenever you say, I'm so and so because so and so, I am weak because I was born this way. I am this way because my parents made me this way. Whenever you talk like this, you're telling yourself a story. And this story is increasing your identification with your thoughts. Your mind has to continually tell itself a story to exist. In this story, you are the hero, and everyone else is the villain or supporting actors. The problem is, like every story, you need a villain, you need tension, you need stress for the story to keep moving. And if there is no tension in the outer world, the mind will just make something up. And that's the reason you can never be happy. Because the mind does not want you to be happy. Because if you were happy, the mind thinks it would die. To escape this cycle, meditation is needed. And more importantly, you need to understand that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts are something that run through your mind non-stop. But you are not those thoughts. Stop telling yourself a story about who you are, what you are, and how you became that way. About how you've always been so and so because of so and so. This story is not helping anyone. It is not helping you. It makes you weak because it helps you identify with the body. I said I won't talk about spiritual awakening because the mind likes to grasp at stuff and pretend it has understood it when it hasn't. But I'll say a few words. Spiritual awakening is a very simple state It is your natural state. And once you achieve it, you will realize how simple the world is, how simple it has always been, how there is nothing to do or accomplish, because you already have everything. It is this realization that you are and have always been perfect that leads to the end of suffering. But this awakening can happen slowly and can take many years. And the only thing to do is to keep trying. How do you know that you have had a real spiritual awakening instead of just a mind, imagined vision? The simple answer is, once you awaken, there will be no going back. There will be no confusion. There will be no doubt. If you still have doubts, if you still fear, if you're still scared about what's going to happen, then you're not spiritually awakened. You have not realized your true self as one of joy and peace. But don't worry, it will happen one day or the other. The process once started, cannot be stopped. In the meantime, stop identifying with your thoughts. Stop telling yourself stories about who you are or how you became this way. You are not this body or this mind that thinks these thoughts. You are something else. And the best way to stop identifying with the thoughts is to be present in the moment. And one of the ways to do that is to breathe consciously, slowly and deeply. So take a deep breath. Let it out. Thank you for listening. I'll just say one thing before I leave. Spiritual awakening is a lot like losing your memory. Once you regain your memory, you realize you always knew who you were, but you had just forgotten. That's what spiritual awakening is, remembering who you are. Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you want a free course on how to contact your inner teacher, your own spiritual guide, the part of the divine who lives inside of you and is guiding your spiritual progress, then please go to my website, thepathtojoy.org. That is thepathtojoy.org. Thank you.